Lisa Goren, welcome to the UpLevel Podcast.
Christy, man, it's great to be here. Up leveling with one of my faves.
Oh, so for our listeners, and we know we have a lot of coactive community that listens in, Lisa and I were roommates through CTI's leadership program back in 2008, 2009. So anyone who's been through that program, you get pretty tight with your roommates. You get tight with your whole group of people that you go through it with it. But Lisa and I have a very special bond. We also did our coach training together too.
Yeah, we did in Vancouver, BC. We did our coach training a few years before doing leadership, and that was also life-changing and I think set us both off on a really fruitful CTI journey. So
Sure
great to be
did.
here this many years later.
Yeah, and I really wanted, well, I was tapping you for a couple different topics because um, you have such vast experience in people and culture, in organizations, and your background, which folks have just heard, is really fascinating, how you started as a talent agent. And let's just start with the theme, leading through crisis, chaos, and change. How would you describe these times that we're living through?
It's funny. Yesterday, I was having another conversation about sort of the whirlwind of what's going on. I've never watched Sharknado, but it's what I was thinking about when I was thinking about my own industry and my own discipline, which is HR, specifically inside of U.S. healthcare. And so I couldn't not think this must be what Sharknado is, which is just everything is completely swirling around us in a way that feels out of control. And we're all trying to figure out and focus and find that one spot that we can focus on and ground in and sort of reorient to. So there's a lot to say about crisis, chaos, and change. There's probably a lot more adjectives, but that's sort of the visual that comes to mind relative to the times we're living in.
Sharknado. You heard it here. You heard it here, folks. We're in the
Right, and
Sharknado times.
I'm not paid to promote whatever that even is.
That's right. I mean, how generous of you. And it's such a good analogy. And specifically, the world you've been in, healthcare over the past 4 years, my goodness, talk about leading through crisis, chaos, and change. What's been one of the biggest challenges you personally as a leader have navigated? And if you can give us a little insight into what you leaned into, who you leaned into to get through that.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Pre-pandemic, and I think many of us use that as sort of a demarcation point. I think about it like my grandparents who came to this country and had wars as demarcation points. This is absolutely the most significant global event that has tied us probably, hopefully, for our lifetimes. And so that's the demarcation point I think about. And healthcare prior to that was a house of cards. I think people underappreciated sort of the delicacy and fragility of the U.S. healthcare system, and I use the word system very loosely because it's not interconnected like in other democracies. You don't have the same type of kind of continuity of care, proactive care. So that alone, for me, has been a huge part of the context of what followed that. So when I reflect on these last few years and I reflect on the pandemic and then working as a leader and then transitioning into an executive role over the last couple of years, I've reflected on a few things. One has been just healthcare. We are awesome at immediate crisis, right? So you go into an emergency room, you're going to see kind of this elegant choreography happening. So it feels like chaos, but it also feels like organized chaos. And those folks thrive in that. And in healthcare, really anybody that you meet can activate that part of themselves. They become this master, this conductor within this Sharknado, within this completely chaotic environment. But the sustained nature of that is completely unnatural. I don't believe that humans are actually designed to sustain that level of stress, of burden, of complexity. And so I think something that started as kind of an acute moment the sort of I use a lot of healthcare metaphors, sort of has become almost a chronic disease of urgency and chaos. And so we have this hypervigilance of this entire workforce, of which there are millions of people who work in healthcare across this country. You have that context that exists inside of this larger sort of pain and suffering, that's a result of exposing, I think, some of those fissures in the healthcare system and in other systems across the country, as well as racial injustice, as well as social unrest, a growing economic disparity, et cetera. So, a lot of what I did those early days of the pandemic professionally was leading certain elements of that crisis, getting information in the hands of people who were literally trying to care for people with this unknown disease. We had staff members who were sleeping in garages at their homes because they didn't know what they were bringing home to their family members. I mean, it was a very terrifying time. Ironically, I was sitting in emergency operations for months at that time, and we were sitting very close to one another. And I just remember the space growing and growing. I remember the first days that we were wearing masks. So I have a lot of memories about that time in particular. But again, the many chapters we've had throughout the pandemic have brought with it kind of new science, new data, new information. But the healthcare workforce has sort of maintained this hypervigilance. And so we're learning through that. We're learning to be aware of that. We're learning to distance ourselves and see, oh gosh, can we just bring it down a level? I don't really like the term new normal, so I'm trying to come up with a different one.
Yeah.
But for lack of a better one, we're trying to figure out how to not say, can we get back to a pre-COVID world or a pre-COVID state? But what opportunity is here for us in the right now and in what's in front of us?
So you spoke about these humans being, and yourself included in that, being in this constant, like their nervous system is in a constant state of fight or flight because they're managing and navigating crisis. What are some of the tools as a leader you've offered your team and something maybe that you're doing for yourself through these times?
Yeah, so I think in the early days of the pandemic, it was easy to tell people about individual mindfulness tools, meditation, the list goes on. I'm a huge fan of body work, so things like acupuncture. I've just started going golfing, which is a different topic for a different podcast, but very interesting. Chiropractic, massage, etc. So I think there are a lot of different kind of individual interventions, ways that we can kind of let go, move from one physical location or one interaction to another. But what I realized as a leader was that is completely inadequate. Organizations more than ever have an imperative to provide the conditions that are safe for their employees, but also to provide the support structures and systems. I can't say that I'm doing that incredibly well. I'm just starting to understand what those support structures are. And so critical incident debriefs are something that we use often in healthcare. That's making sure that people who've experienced something traumatic have the opportunity to work through that with a professional. We're recognizing you can't do that just once. You have to do that in a perfectly timed way. And then you have to do it on an ongoing basis. I've become very open about having my own therapist and how therapy has benefited me throughout my life. And I do that and very conscious of the fact that I'm a leader and I'm an executive who people know just within the organization. I think it's really important that those at the tippy top are vulnerable and are open to talking about what's up for them and making sure that humanity is a key part of who we are and how we are at work. So I'm exploring systemic ways that we can support our workforce.
Lisa Goren for president. Lisa Goren for president.
Well, I mean, given the options, and I'm not like that young, but I do feel like there might be, I might be able to, move in a pole position here, depending on how things go.
I would think so. And
Yeah.
what you're articulating obviously is mission behind UpLevel to humanize the workplace, but just like let's just humanize humans because we've gotten like we've really gotten so far away from what you're talking about, our humanity, our vulnerability. I loved how you said at the tippy top, the folks need to be modeling, hey, I am taking care of my well-being and my mental health. And I love that you're looking at it from a systematic level because what we saw early days of the pandemic, organizations had really good efforts of bringing in kind of the platform therapist and or coaches, and it's gone away. It was like a fad. It was in and out, and it wasn't part of a bigger systematic strategy. And so I'm appreciating, I know you're humble too, that you're like you're beginning with it. But what I know about you, Lisa, is that you're a leader of integrity and you care so deeply. Can we actually just I'd love for you to share, if you're willing, a little bit what motivates you to do this work day in, day out? What got you to this point?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that question. I think it's an important question that a lot of folks are thinking about no matter what they're up to. I think this is one of those moments in the world where we're not having an existential crisis, but we are sort of collectively having existential questions. And I think that's kind of cool because normally that was like reserved for people like you and me and like the 12 other people who signed up for the cool program in the woods to sort
Yeah.
of navel gaze together.
Yeah.
Now, the secret's out, right? Which is that we
Yeah.
all want to live a meaningful life. And that doesn't
Yes.
always mean the same thing for everybody, but we're more open to questioning it. So what brought me to healthcare is exactly what I think about even 20 some years later. So rewind to 1996. I was a senior in college. There's no reason for anybody to do the math right now. I'm 49, coming on 50. So again, different podcast about midlife crisis. Although you could
Oh,
argue that happened. You knew me when that happened 10 years ago at 40.
and are we
So
gonna have a 50th birthday? Like, should I be booking something? Because I
well,
know
I
I was
hope
there
I'm
for your
having a
40th.
50th birthday,
I
but
mean,
I will say
I'm sorry,
that
celebration. I'm
the
sorry, 50th
celebration will
celebration.
look different. But yeah, let's have listeners know that there was a big blowout and there was also a talent show. So let's be clear about what was on the agenda for the 40th. So who knows what
What's
the
gonna
50th
happen
is like,
okay, I can't wait. I just hope I get an invite. All right.
right?
Sorry. Keep
Edge
going.
of your seat.
Yes.
Well, we're all going to come to the jungle. What do you mean? This is time for a welcome to the jungle party.
Welcome to the
Axel,
jungle. You're
let's do it.
50. Let's let
Let's
her rock.
let's do it. So 1996, it was a Sunday. I was on the phone with my mom. I have a very close family. We were planning my graduation party. I was about to graduate from college. We'd been on the phone for quite a long period of time, maybe 40 minutes or something like that. And all of a sudden she said, something's wrong. I have to go. And she hung up on me. So I did what most people do when they're hung up on. I called back. So I called back. Also, let me just explain, this is sort of pre-cell phone days. This is like landline days. This is not hyper communication time.
Right.
I call, my dad answers, he confirms something's wrong. We're calling the paramedics. And hours ensued. I lived about an hour and a half away from my parents in Michigan. I remember arriving at the hospital. I remember a doctor who was also a family friend meeting me in the elevator. It was dark. It was cold. And I remember him saying, your mom had a brainstem stroke. She's going to die. I remember him saying that to me in the elevator. Took the elevator up, saw my mom, laying there in the ICU. She had what was called a brainstem stroke, which resulted in something called locked-in syndrome. Locked-in syndrome means that you're completely paralyzed from the eyes down. You have no ability to move. You have no ability to breathe on your own. You literally can't do anything, but you have complete cognitive function. So you're truly trapped inside your body. The world was introduced to this through a book and then a movie called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. So if you want to learn more about locked-in syndrome and you want to go past the Google, that's where you can learn a really beautiful story. And so we were preparing for my mom's demise, for her death. I have an older brother. This was certainly not something that we were prepared to face. There was nothing that we knew of that had preceded this. We learned that, this was probably the result of a congenital defect of some sort. My mom continued to live. She got a trach inserted. She went onto a breathing machine, a ventilator, and she continued to survive. And she also continued to become more and more cognitively aware and alert. And she was also 53 years old and otherwise seemingly healthy. And so there was this moment where I really believe she made a choice to live. I always joke that she kind of looked at me and my brother and my dad and thought, these yahoos cannot go, like, I have got to stick around. There's no way. And she's right. So my dad said, I know that you're still in school, and I wonder, since you're a senior, maybe there's a way for you to kind of stay in school, be in touch with your professors, do your work remotely, but be your mom's eyes and ears and voice while she goes into a rehabilitation program at the University of Michigan. I think she was their first, or one of their first, fully ventilated patients in their rehab program. That rehab program really made a world of difference. I saw my mom move her hand for the first time. She gave me the middle finger. That was her first motion, which
I love
was
her.
very true to form, and let us know that nothing had changed relative to her personality. I saw her wiggle her toes for the first time. I was there for her first words. It was beautiful. And what I saw in that moment wasn't just this great medicine and this great science and these great doctors. What I saw was nurses. I saw rehabilitation professionals. I saw the people who would come in and empty her garbage every day and keep her room clean. I saw a team of people who were the connective tissue that actually, I know today, is what holds our healthcare system together, on the backs of these beautiful people, and talk about humanity. So I'm not a science and math person, so I knew that I couldn't change my career trajectory to something scientific. But over time, as listeners learned through my bio, I pivoted from a very different career, although one that is still about connecting to people through art and storytelling, to this one. And I choose to work in HR within healthcare specifically because I am fully committed to helping those who did so much to save my mom, save my family, and really help us. So I'm here to help the helpers.
Such a beautiful story. And your mom's still with us. It's 2024.
Yeah, she's 81. She is feisty. She, she obviously has some healthcare struggles. She's still by definition a quadriplegic. She has 24-hour care. There's a whole story about sort of the financial difficulties that my parents and many Americans have to face trying to pay for the healthcare that they need. But she is extremely lucky, and she spends her days with people she loves in my parents' home. They moved to a home that was easier to live in for her needs. She gets to see not my kids, because we live across the country, but she gets to see my brother's kids and him and his wife and other family members and friends all the time.
See, I think what I want to pull from this for folks is leaders having a really big purpose that's driving them to continue to navigate these times. And yours it's profound, it's deep, like you being there as she gave you the middle finger, her toes wiggled, like just, I felt it viscerally. And I want that for other leaders, because I feel like that's how we get through these times. There's something that's pulling us or that's pushed us, propelled us, and we can go back to that moment in time. But oh yeah, this is why I'm gonna get up and do that meditation so I can get into the Shark Tank today and swim around, right? Like what do you think of that? Do you think it's essential for folks to have a purpose and a why in these times?
Absolutely. Having said that, I think that, my story is probably at one end of the continuum of like, wow, that's a life event, right? And admittedly, I was, again, I was in my early 20s. I had a very different career. I always tell people being a talent agent is exactly how you would picture it. So
I had a
again,
little stint of that too. Do you remember? I had a little, oh my goodness.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect career for people in their 20s, and it is
Yes.
exactly what you think it is,
Yeah.
especially in the 90s.
Yeah.
So it's not like in that moment everything changed, but there, that's also the beauty of life moving on and of quiet and other things happening, because sometimes our purpose doesn't jump right up in our face and slap us and say, hey, make a change. It doesn't grab you by the shoulders. It's often quiet, it's often methodical. We often uncover it in moments of reflection and questioning. Sometimes it happens if you're writing your, morning pages because you bought The Artist's Way, but most of the time it happens in the shower
Yeah.
or on your morning commute or when you just have a sec and you're not looking at your phone.
Yeah.
So I think connecting to a why is important. It might not be one that's huge and obvious. It might also be a series of moments and events that we just have to tune into a little bit differently and a little bit more deeply.
So wise. So well said. I know in your bio, part of what I pulled out as part of your purpose, and I'm just going to get the words right here, devising ways for people to have more good days, or at least more good days than bad days. What's important to you about that?
Yeah, I don't remember the moment where this idea of more good days kind of came to me, but it's a concept that I haven't been able to let go of. And, you know, to me, I'm not a math person. I already mentioned that, but I think about kind of this fraction, the numerator and the denominator. We definitely just when we look back at our life, no matter how long we're able to inhabit this earth and this life, that we're going to look back and we'll have wanted to live more good days than bad. That to me is what defines a good life. And so, what I try to bring, at least to work every day, and what I try to compel other people to experience and bring to work every day is this concept of more good days. So it's my job to be, a multiplier to help find space for people to have good days. Like that's something that I work at service of. And it's something that when I reflect on my life and I think about everything that makes my life beautiful, which includes not such great things, that's all about having more good days. So it's kind of beyond purpose, and it's something that's very practical, and I'm a very practical person.
Yeah.
It's just this practical concept I can always go back to say, am I making someone's day better right now?
Yeah.
And how are my days going?
I love that. It's measurable. It's measurable, right? So, in just going back to the purpose piece, it's like, what is something that's measurable so that you yourself, as the person navigating these times, you can say, yeah, I am honoring that. I'm living into it. Um, that's that's some good wisdom from Lisa Goren. Who's someone that's inspired you in your journey?
I mean, certainly my mom. So there isn't any other person who has inspired me more. And it's easy to think like, oh, she was at the brink of death, and then she worked through it, right? You can like see you can see the Netflix adaptation of that story is common across. Many people have had similar experiences, but it isn't completely that. In fact, if I think about who my mom is, it's sort of like, yeah, duh, of course she dealt with that way. Here was a woman who grew up with as an only child. Her mom, my grandma, had lost several children to miscarriage prior to that. So my mom was a bit of a miracle in and of herself. Um, uh, my grandparents were very traditional. They came over from um, sort of Russia or Poland. We're not really sure which, because at that time borders changed a lot. So I'm of Eastern European Jewish descent. Her grandparents actually ended up going to Winnipeg. And so I always like to do a shout out to Canada when I
Yeah.
can. And so my grandparents ended up meeting in Winnipeg. And as things were at that time, my grandpa was a complete misogynist. I mean, he was just totally sexist. So he had one child, and it was a girl, and maybe that girl would go to college, and she did. She got a master's degree, and I think that befuddled him. It ended up that my grandma probably had more business sense than my grandfather did. I think she ran a couple of businesses early on, and then once my mom was around, he was like, "You're not driving anymore, and you're not running any more businesses." But I think what was really happening was she was very astute and very wise. But the way I knew my grandma was she was cooking these magnificent meals in the kitchen and being a very traditional wife. And that's the context in which my mom and many women grew up in the 40s and 50s and into the 60s. And so I think about my mom and how she was able to break through that misogyny, how she was, compelled to go to the University of Michigan, got her bachelor's degree, said, well, that's not enough, got her master's degree. She spent time both working and, taking care of my brother and I, but an incredibly intelligent person, a person that everybody wanted to be around, and not in that gregarious way, not in a center of attention kind of way.
Mhm.
She was the one where people, they'd want to bend her ear. They'd want her to give them advice. They would want to run things by her. I mean, that was so much of who my mom was. My mom was the person who would bring community together, and she still does. She's the person who, when she says something, you really, really listen. And there's probably going to be something sort of like funny and acerbic within the wisdom. So she's not going to be overtly insulting, but she's going to hold you accountable. And so, when people think about or interact with me, sometimes people's first reactions, maybe not in this context, might be, well, Lisa's funny, or she makes me laugh, or something like what's underneath that is really her. And it's really this, you talked about humanity. She meets people heart to heart. She doesn't meet them head to head. She has a really wise head, but it's really her heart that is so open. And growing up with a steady diet of open heartedness, of not being afraid to have an open heart, knowing that I would get hurt, but knowing that that was okay because getting hurt would be worth it, and that's a place of connection to help disarm people. This has become who I am.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's easy to go, well, I had a really great mentor and that person was really smart and I read that person's stuff. I mean, I can talk about all of that, but at the end of the day, it was really her implicit and modeling the way, her behavior, that made me into who I am. And that is a person and a leader who is over indexed on heart, soul, and a little bit of head thrown in there, because for gosh sakes, we all need more of that.
I've got like full body shivers because as you were speaking about her and her qualities, you are describing yourself. I mean, that's how
Mm,
I experience you, and I'm sure the folks that you work with, and I know your close friends who I've had the honor to meet. Eh, So she did a really good job of passing on those qualities to you, Lisa. And
mm.
the open-heartedness. I remember describing you like you are all heart with like little legs and little hands. It's just like a big ball of heart. And you're so friggin' smart. You're so friggin' smart. And then the humor. See, this is something that I think is a medicine that could serve humanity right now because we are taking ourselves so fucking seriously.
Yeah,
So seriously, and
yeah,
especially in America,
yeah.
the climate has just become so polarized, so divisive. People can't communicate. And one of the things you do very elegantly, very generously, graciously is insert humor intelligently in a way that disarms the situation, the individual, the group. I don't know if you can give folks tips on that because it feels like it's innate, like it's such an innate and clearly got passed on from your mom hearing the story. Any thoughts around like humor being an antidote for leading through crisis, chaos, and change?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying. I mean, what's coming up for me is it's a bridge, right? So not only does it disarm people, it's a bridge. I'm immersed in conflict. I mean, I always tell people, listen, leading an HR function right now in healthcare, I'm not invited to many career days. Like nobody really wants to hear or be what I do. I mean, it's terrible, right? Because people are hurting, they're having their own crises. Workplaces are filled with violence. I'm working in healthcare, we're serving the public, so we're trying to help people at their worst time, and they're hurting our people. So it's a tough it's a tough sell to be like, let's be funny, But the reality is, this goes back to Brene Brown's work. This goes back to anybody's work relative to vulnerability, right? Which is, can we just make space for it all? And, of course, there's inappropriate times for humor. And there's also humor that's so like defensive and awkward and ill-timed in place that actually causes harm, right?
Yeah.
There's also insulting humor.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about looking at a moment and saying, hey, there's something about this that's sort of incongruent, or there's a moment where I can bring levity, who doesn't want more joy?
Oh,
Who doesn't want
please.
more of all the things? And when you start cutting out things like humor and saying there's no place for it, you're saying there's no place for all the other emotions and feelings. And so it's incredibly important to me that people can, I always say, not just do their best, but be their best when they're at work. I don't want people to have to put on armor. I don't want our racially diverse employees to have to code switch. And so, this is a dream, but this happens when you intentionally strive to create a workplace where people really can be themselves. And part of that is being themselves around the way they see what a problem is, or they connect with other people. So, I could go on and on about kind of the benefits of humor, but I would also put it in the category of just fucking joy. And I think people want and need more fucking joy
We are hungry for
at
it.
work and in
Yeah.
their lives. Yes,
Yeah.
we're starving
We're
for it.
starving.
Yes.
Starving.
Yeah. So can we do important work? Can we do mission-driven work and experience joy? Like,
Yeah.
can and I think, you talked about polarization, you talked about just the divisiveness. Our minds have become so polarized. They become so this or that.
Yeah.
And you really can't make change to systems. You can't make change to even the complexity of a human system if you're not willing to sit with tension. If you're not willing to sit and say, how do we calibrate something? Not how do you say yes to this, no to this. Now, there's a whole world where that makes sense. Like, prioritizing and focusing. It's good to know what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. But when you talk about sort of the mess of human existence and the systems around that, and what those systems exist within, we have to be able to hold the tension of all the things, not just some of the things, or this or that.
Lisa, how do we get back to that? I mean, I don't know if we ever did it well, but I feel the pre-pandemic, we were doing it better than we have. Like, and it just feels like we've become worn out, just the way you described the current state. Like people are worn out, which it's like the capacity to hold the tension, to hold the polarization has gotten really, really minute. So how do we grow our capacity to hold this tension?
Well, I think, obviously I don't have the answer to that, but
Come on, Lise.
you, if I did, you'd be buying my book in an airport.
This is true.
Because
Okay.
that's where the smartest books are. It's where all the answers are. Just going to that airport bookstore. I think that, yeah, being worn out is perfect. And what's happening is we're worn out and we're worn down, and we're getting recruited. We're getting recruited by the simple-minded, right? So we're getting recruited by the polarized sides of issues, because we
Yes.
don't have enough of this. We need help. So in this moment of help, we're being taken advantage of by these extremes. Now, the answer sometimes lives at the extreme, but mostly, my perspective, it lives in the mushy middle.
Yeah.
And I'm a very simple person. You think about, well, things were better 3 years ago, things were better 5 years ago, things not so great 10 years ago. We're a blip on the ass of humanity and the universe, but
Yeah.
I think about the beginning of the blip of humanity. We kind of got to get back to what we used to do. We hung out in caves. We were like, do you want to come over to my cave? You bring the woolly mammoth and
Yeah.
I'll bring the side dish.
Yeah.
And like, I'll have you. It doesn't really get much more complex than connecting with each other. I just think we don't want to go to each other's caves anymore.
Yeah.
We don't want to. How many things do you read around the holidays and the title is How to Navigate Your Awkward Uncle at Thanksgiving?
Right.
Or it's like, don't even have Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Because that, right? So there's so much out there about what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
And I think we're losing our own sense of self, our own agenda. We're not seeing ourselves in each other. We're really losing what it is that drives us, our own values, our own sense of purpose, and our own ability, frankly, to connect with actual other people.
Yeah.
And so obviously I don't have the answer, but I do think that we collectively can figure it out. We've done it before.
We've done it, but we've actually done it many, many times if we look back on the history of humanity, right? So we can do this, people.
We can do this. Yes, as Glennon Doyle would say, we can do hard things.
We can do hard things. Uh, I'm wondering if you'd share a little bit when I was thinking about joy, witnessing your journey of parenting and bringing these two young little beings in the world with your beautiful partner. What are you willing to share around that? It just feels like an important part of your journey and something that a lot of it happened like a little bit pre and during pandemic. Like this is right. How old's your
Yeah,
youngest now? Yeah.
yeah. My wife Meg and I had a beautiful, long relationship without kids. Long being relative. I don't know, 6 years, 7 years, something like that. We sort of stopped counting, and we lived a really beautiful life. And that's another demarcation point in my life, which is pre-kids and post-kids, because most of the people who I know who are my age, they had kids in their 20s, they had kids in their 30s. We had our kids when I was in my 40s. We had our second kid when Meg was almost, I'm trying to remember if she was 40 or if she was almost 40. Of course, geriatric mother, all the stuff about medicine that again is not the topic of this podcast, but it was unusual for us to come into parenting later, and much of that was finding each other in a different point in our own lives. And so, the kids, we have two boys, or as we like to say, they're boys until they tell us otherwise. And admittedly, I said, this guy, he seems kind of funny, and that's good. I kind of wanted to find somebody who had brought a little bit of my spirit, and ironically, he was older for a sperm donor. He is my age. And so that made him like 10 or 12 years or 15 years older than most sperm donors. He has a family of his own, and he and his wife had come to the decision to help families who couldn't conceive easily. And so through, again, he's anonymous, but his generosity led us to our first child, who is now 6 years old. And being a parent to him has been a wild ride. He's extremely unique. He is definitely a person who, if you subscribe to the idea of old souls or he's been here before, that dude has been here before. Many adults who meet him want to spend more time with him because he's one of those magnetic people who has breadth and depth. His brother, who just turned 3 years old, it was really a series of miraculous events that led to him being a full biological brother to his older brother, because there wasn't any sperm left for us to use, and so we thought that we'd have to go with a different donor. Meg was having trouble, as most women do. It's not like it happens like that. And we received a call while she was going through that process. We received a call from the sperm bank, and they said, "Hey, we had somebody, return a clean vial of the original sperm that sample that you had asked for. Do you want that? You have one sample." And so we had it shipped here.
Wow.
And of that sample, she went through IUI the second time. She had no viable kind of combinations except one. And that one was implanted, and we now have our we call him Miracle Max, because he really is a miracle in many ways. Couldn't be more different than his brother. And he was born in 2020. He was born November 11th, 2020, and so he had a very different life experience and socialization experience. It was
Yes.
interesting to see him interact with other humans for the first time.
Yes.
His older brother was sort of immersed in community right out of the gate, but Max wasn't. he had to be shielded from people for a really long time. So he's highly social now, but it was really interesting to see how different they are and how different their entries into the world have been. And that has absolutely led to another layer of growth for me, of humility, of reflection, of learning, of beginning again, of
Patience.
presence. Oh my God, patience. My God. But also, I got to say, I got to put a plug out there for non-traditionally aged parents.
Yeah.
My ego is not wrapped up as much in it as I think I don't feel competitive with my kids. I don't feel like they're holding me back. You
Yeah.
know, Meg and I got to do all these great things. We traveled the world. We woke up when we want. We ate what we want. We bought what we wanted.
Yeah.
Did cool stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I don't feel I'm not angling for some big job and I'm having to be home with the kids and resenting them because they're holding me back.
Yeah.
It's working out for us, and that's lucky, and that's privilege, and a lot of that privilege it comes to us because we're white and because of our education and our income. And so I want to acknowledge that is not everyone's experience. At the end of the day, I feel just incredibly lucky to have this family. And as someone who grew up gay, it wasn't something that I automatically envisioned for myself. So it's even more precious to me. The last thing I'd say about it is I think, like pregnancy, there's a lot that we don't talk about and that we have a lot of sort of shrouds of shame around. And I think one of those is the difficulty that any family has and women have conceiving, but also that men have, and kind of people's whether they want kids or they don't want kids, the assumptions that we make around people. So again, different podcast, but
Yeah.
all of that exists in my hemisphere, in my world here, as I think about what it means to be a parent. For me, it works, and I feel lucky.
I thank you for sharing that. I just it's been such a blessing witnessing you go through this and knowing how hard you worked for it. And I just you're someone that I'm so grateful you and your partner procreated because you're such wonderful humans to raise this next generation. And I think when leading through crisis, chaos, and change, I mean, parenting is that on the day to day. And I haven't talked a lot about it openly, but I've had my own challenges that you spoke to about, not being able to conceive and wanting that and then being very close with friends as they go through major transitions like divorces and then moving in and helping them raise their kids. And um, my goodness, it is talk about a leadership development program day in, day out. You're
Yeah.
signing up for, on top of this world that we're all navigating. Its own shark tank, if you will. So
Well, there's you're highlighting or reminding me of, I think, kind of two other things, right? So one is really just a fundamental fact, and again, back to America getting it wrong, and this really is the United States uniquely gets it wrong, which is parental leave, which is the amount of time that we say somebody can or should be with a family. I mean, my wife took 3 weeks off after Max was born. 3 weeks. Now she was entitled to more, but that's what happens. We pressure people, right?
so
We're like, well,
fucked.
you can just have a baby in the bush and then just come and do the rest and come do the rest of your job. I mean,
Bunch of
we have
bullshit.
such a flawed view.
Yeah.
And then secondly, but thank God, we are not telling enough stories about unique family units. I mean, we
Yeah.
have very deliberately
Yeah.
sort of selected people in our lives who really help raise our kids. We
Mm,
don't believe that the two of us have all the answers. We don't believe the two of us even know anything about what we're doing. And
yeah.
so, how do we create and validate and illuminate these beautiful definitions of family?
Oh,
I mean, it's not
yes.
traditional for two little boys to be raised by two women, so there's that part. But it's really about our best friend who comes over every Saturday. And when
Mm,
I am so at the brink, she just comes right in and is like, "Hey guys," because she has the energy to do that, right? It's
yeah.
it's what you were able to do for a close friend of yours, which is to, going through divorce, you had to be there to help, support her and support her kid, and also just bring something extra and different. And
Yeah.
sometimes that doesn't happen through parenting. It
Yeah.
happens. I love being an aunt.
Yeah.
My own
Yeah.
aunt, who passed away several years ago, was one of the most important and powerful adult figures in my life as a child and as an adult. So we have to widen our berth here, and other societies do this better.
So much better. This actually goes back to talking about how we become so disconnected that we don't want to go over to each other's caves, the silos that we're living in, like literally the buildings that we build, and the lack of the system of the community network. And part of the antidote is going back to that. Yeah, raising the kids in the kibbutz, raising the kids, in the commune, like all of us being together to pick up, when it just, how do we get back there? I mean, that is a big prayer I'm holding for humanity. How do you want to end this conversation? Like, what is it that you want to leave us with as far as maybe your wish for humanity and leading through these times?
Yeah, I mean, gosh,
This is
there's
so
so much
big.
that
I know. We'll have to have
there's
it
so
part
much
two.
that I wish. I mean, I always thought about and think about when I'm connecting with people at work. I've often thought, yes, this is about creating more good days. It's also about creating a space where people feel understood. I think that's the greatest human need that we have. And I always want to help people, who feel trapped and they can't see a way, that they can't see a path forward, where there's no door, there's a window. I've always wanted to help people see that. And so, my hope for this conversation is that this stirs up some thoughts for people, but that it also validates what's in people's hearts and gives them some courage to open up their hearts. And I mean, listen, my wish for humanity is what I said earlier. It's nothing pithy. Let's find some more fucking joy out there. Can we? Can we like find just a little more fucking joy and bring that with us? And that means doing it through this, not through anything else, but connecting here.
Can we please find more joy, peeps? These are important, important words of wisdom from this beautiful human. Lisa, I'm so
Mm.
grateful that our paths crossed in the Blue Horizon Hotel in Vancouver in 2007. And we haven't talked a lot, but every time I get to be in your presence, I become a better human. My heart opens up more. I get connected to my joy just being around you. And I'm so excited that I know you're headed off into a meeting. There's 14,000 people reporting into the 150 HR managers, right? That you are in your network that you're responsible for. Did I get
We
that
have
right?
we have a handful over 100 HR or people and culture folks, and the organization is about 14,000 people here in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, lucky people that they get to have some of Lisa Goren. And I know, yes, you'll be humble about that, but it's so rare to find a leader that is leading with heart. And that's what I want folks to lead with or to leave with is how can I bring a little bit more of my heart? It doesn't mean I have to leave my head behind. A little bit more of my heart, a little bit more of my humor at the appropriate times and bring more joy. Thank you
Mm.
for joining us for this important conversation. I love you.
Thanks for including me, and I love you too.